وعليكم السلام.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الحمد لله خالق المخلوقين، الحمد لله الذي جعلنا أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. All praise is due to Allah, who has created us. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has made us from the ummah of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. One of the things that we need to look at as an ummah is the very character of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran about the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's character, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. And to put it in a very simple way in English, because English doesn't fully capture the beautiful manner in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is praising the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we have made you on the highest level of noble character. The highest level of character that exists. We also know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in so many ways. Through the revelation of the Quran, through being chosen to be the messenger of Allah, that this character is something that is an example for all of us. What I'm saying might sound simple, but when we look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when we look at the actions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when we hear of the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we don't often enough ask ourselves, how much does that Sunnah, how much does that character inform our own selves, inform the way that we do things, inform the manner in which we behave. Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha was asked about the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she said that the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the Quran. His character is the Quran. So we know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a living exemplary of the Holy Quran. In other words, we have the divine guidance that comes through the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, which for us as Muslims is something that we should engage with as reality, not as historical information, not as a text which was revealed at a certain period in time and then say that it was for that context. We have to engage with this Quran as if it is the reality from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, past, present, and future. And where do we find this example of engagement as human beings? We find it in the person of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We find it in the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We find it in the way the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did things, in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when we hear the word Sunnah, what are we talking about? What the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, and what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam approved of. And the Sunnah permeates the life of the Prophet ﷺ during the period that he was on earth. During his time in Medina, during his time in Mecca, we find the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in every facet. We find the companions, Hazrat Abu Bakr, Hazrat Umar, Hazrat Uthman, Hazrat Ali, radiallahu anhu, and so on and so on. Engaging directly with the Sunnah, engaging directly with the Prophet ﷺ. Those who could learn from him directly would sit in his company. Those who were not able to, who had to work, they would come afterwards and ask their companions and ask their friends, what did you learn today? How much have you learned? Tell us what you got from the Prophet ﷺ. My respected brothers and sisters, elders, scholars in Islam, How much do we put that question forward in our own lives, in the lives of our children around us? We know that as human beings, we are always told your mind and your body, keep your mind and your body healthy. Islam, we look at the human being from multiple dimensions, not just the mind, not just the body, the heart, the soul, the self. How do you see yourself as a human being? How do you conceive who you are? How does the teenagers, the young people around us, how do they get this idea of who they are and what they should be and what they want to be? What image is in our minds and in our heads when we think about what we want to be and what we want to do next year, the year after that, in 5 years' time? For those people that have long-term plans, in 10 years' time. Wallahu alam, Allah knows better, Allah knows best. Nobody knows the extent of their lifespan. We can plan, but Allah plans. Yet with the time that we are given, and with the little knowledge that we have, how much access, how much recourse are we taking to the greatest references that we have in this world? And I'm not talking of a journal or a book. If there's academics sitting here in the masjid, they'll know what I'm talking about. Whenever there's somebody writes a paper, what's the references? What ranked journal are you citing? I remember my teacher getting asked this question, Hafidahullah, and he said, I'm citing the highest ranked journal ever, the highest ranked source of information ever. There is no journal, no book, no information higher than this. And the other Muslim academics that were sitting in the room were quite stunned. What is this reference? So he smiled and he said, it's the Quran. It's the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Do we really see that as our reference point when we engage in our daily lives, when we set out our plans, when we make our decisions? Are we resorting to this reference that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us? And within this reference, one of the aspects of the sunnah that we often neglect, that we often forget, is the character of the Prophet ﷺ. The way he behaved, not just the way he made salah, not just the way he fasted in the month of Ramadan. The rest of his deen, his mu'amalat, his social engagement, not just his ibadat. We teach our kids, or we try to encourage the youth, those of us that are engaged in the masajids, that are trying to do good. We try to get the kids to learn this ibadat, how to perform salah, how to make wudu. What about their social relationships? How we treat other people? Where do the youth get that information from? Where do we get that information from? Is it information that comes with our cultural baggage? Perhaps we were not born in the US, we come from somewhere else. Do we draw our source of character from the culture that we come from? Or do we look at the sunnah of the Prophet? And if we do, if we actually look at the sunnah of the Prophet, how are we doing it? How are we doing it? Are we sitting with our family once a week and reading one hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in our own language with our humble effort, just so that we can hear something from the Prophet ﷺ in our homes? When those gatherings take place at the mosque, are we trying to get there so that we may at least hear something that the Prophet ﷺ said? And this is the question, my respected brothers and sisters, that I hope today you will take this question, you will engage it, and you will find answers and solutions to it. From here, I can speak about the character of the Prophet ﷺ. And there's numerous examples, and inshallah, I will give you some today. I will give you some, and I will give myself some, so that we may think really hard about what we do, and how we engage, and how we treat other people, and what our social relations are. Because we must not forget, we live in a context where Muslims are not the majority. Not yet. Not yet. But in this context, we become the examples of what a Muslim is. Not just what people see on television. In our work, in the companies that we own, in the professional practices that we have, in whatever context you are, you, whatever your name is, Muhammad, Ahmad, Fatima, Aisha, are the example of what a Muslim is. And if our examples are poor, if our examples are not an example that's based on some knowledge, who is going to want to take the shahada of being a Muslim except those that Allah guides through His infinite mercy without any human intervention? The first stage of Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'idati al hasanah, the ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, invite to the path of your Lord with hikmah, with wisdom, with maw'idati al hasanah, and good advice, beautiful advice, advice that is in a nice way, in a nice form. The first stage before we even open our mouths to do the da'wah is our behavior, is our character. And we have to be cautious about it because it's part of our deen. It's part of our lives, it's part of who we are. It's part of our representation, how we represent Islam to the world. And there is no Nabi coming after the Prophet ﷺ. We know that. So the responsibility of sharing the beauty of Islam is with the greatest ummah. It's with this ummah. It's with this ummah. We, the ummah of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, regardless of our color, regardless of our culture, regardless of our profession, regardless of our work, regardless of our financial status, we are the ones that have this responsibility of sharing the beauty of Islam. But we cannot think of sharing the beauty of Islam if we don't look at ourselves. Islam has a long history of character development. There's been character development since the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Over 1,400 years. We know that when the Nabi ﷺ was offered gold to the extent of Uhud, the mount, Safa and Marwa, the mounts, will give you gold like these mountains over here. He was told. We'll make you the ruler of Arabia. And what else? We'll marry you to the best person from the best tribe. It was a tribal system then. So you'll have the best political network. So what was the Prophet ﷺ? He was offered wealth to a great extent to be the most wealthiest person in the whole area. He was offered political power, political power, to become the ruler of everything. And he was offered what else? He was offered networks, social networks amongst the elite. So political power, economic power, social networks, to be amongst the elite. What would somebody have said today? MashaAllah, if I have all that wealth, I can do this. If I have that kind of political power, I can change this and I can do that. If I'm networked with this elite circles, I'll have this opportunity and that opportunity. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? He refused. He refused. And he went back and he started training people. Who? The Sahaba radiallahu anhu. The very companions through whom Islam spread across the globe. to Russia, to China, and to Africa, and everywhere else afterwards. But he put an emphasis on training the character of these people around him. It was not economic resources that he chased. It was not political resources that he chased. It was not elite connections that he chased. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired him to train the few people that had taken Shahid at that time. And train them he did. Not just by word, not just by action, but through his characters. Now, just to give you some examples of the character of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, at one stage, in the early part of his nubuwwah, was in Makkah. And in Medina, he came later on. And there was one incident. There's many incidents between these two cases. There's one incident, and this is a famous one. I'm sure many brothers and sisters know this, where he was walking in a certain place and he took the same route every day. And there was an elderly lady that lived in a slightly elevated position above this road where the Prophet was. And she waited for him every day. She was not Muslim. She waited for him, and whenever he walked past, she threw all the rubbish down on the table. Imagine in a situation like that, somebody does that to you. Let them do it to your car and see how angry and upset people get. SubhanAllah, it would be, people, there would be quite some scenes. The Prophet ﷺ carried on his way. One day he walked the same path, and that lady did not throw the dirt or the rubbish onto him, which he would normally collect and throw it on the Prophet ﷺ. She didn't do it. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? He went to look for her, my respected brothers and sisters. He went to inquire, where is this lady? Because she did not throw the rubbish on me today. And he found out that she was very ill. So he went to her place and he asked her if she's okay. And it is subhanAllah through the kindness and the rahmah of the Prophet ﷺ that lady took Shahada. Imagine what traveled through her heart. Somebody that she had hatred for, that she was collecting every last bit of rubbish that she could find, throwing it on the Prophet ﷺ. And here he comes, looking for me when I'm sick and I can't throw the rubbish. My respected brothers and sisters, we need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. We need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for our weaknesses and our flaws and our faults and our incompetence and our ignorance. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that forgives. Let us ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَاسْتَغْفِرُوهُ إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. There is another example, my respected brothers and sisters, and as I mentioned earlier, there's many examples. And I'm sharing these examples so that we can realize that yes, the character of the Prophet ﷺ was extremely elevated, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised the Prophet ﷺ to an incomparable status. But at the same time, we have to be aware that although the Prophet ﷺ had that status, he was sent as a compassion to all people, as a compassion to all the worlds. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. I did not send you except as a confession to the world, to all of creation. So this deen, my respected brothers and sisters, does not belong to us. It is not a deen that we can claim ownership of. This beautiful deen is for everyone, for everybody. Remember the incident where the Prophet ﷺ was standing with his companions and there was a funeral going past of a Jewish person. And the Prophet ﷺ cried. And the Sahaba radiallahu asked the Prophet, why are you crying? This is a Jewish person going past. He said it's one more person going into his qabr, going into his grave, without having taken shahada from me. Look at the extent of the love that the Prophet ﷺ had, so that he wanted everybody to embrace this beautiful deen. Everybody. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends the Prophet ﷺ as a compassion. It is at this very nature of compassion that we find the core of the Prophet ﷺ's character. If you want to understand the character of the Prophet ﷺ, try to understand what compassion is all about. And then multiply it to the highest level you can find for compassion. Then you will come close to understanding the character of the Prophet ﷺ. We know that when the Prophet ﷺ moved to Medina, there was a trading market in Medina. The Muslims were not allowed full access. They could not trade in the way that they wanted to trade. So the Prophet ﷺ, with the help of the companions, established a new trading market in Medina, where the companions went and traded, so that the community could be economically sustainable. It could be economically well off. It didn't have to seek assistance from other communities. Other communities would seek assistance from it. This was the hikmah of the Prophet ﷺ in his da'wah. So one of the first things that were done strategically was establish a new trading market. But there's one incident that took place at this very trading market, where the Prophet ﷺ went and he was looking at the sellers of grain, wheat, barley if you want, lentils for those of you that are from South Asia and Southeast Asia, big baskets of grain. And he came to one particular seller and he pushed his hand into the grain. And the bottom, where his hand reached down into the bucket, the basket, the bottom, the grain was wet. Now this person was selling grain. Selling grain. The Prophet ﷺ asked him, why don't you tell people that the grain at the bottom is wet? How many times do we see we're dealing with somebody wants to sell us something, and they hide the flaws. No, don't worry, everything is fine. They hide the flaws. They don't tell you something has to be changed. They don't tell you this is broken. Where it's a business transaction, they don't give you the full details. They hide the flaws. Here the Prophet ﷺ put his hand into the grave and he asked the person, why don't you tell the people that the grain at the bottom is wet? In other words, don't deceive, don't lie, don't cheat, don't be dishonest, don't make up things to hide the flaws so that you can benefit but the next person loses. This is the character of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is the character that we as Muslims of the Ummah of Nabi Muhammad ﷺ, we have to strive for. We have to try and achieve that character. No matter how weak we are, no matter how difficult. If you really, really want to do something, my brothers and sisters, you can. It is not impossible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nowhere in the Quran does He say, it is impossible for you to do this. It is impossible for you to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yet at every point we can understand, we are encouraged to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are told, follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we are told in such a manner to follow the Prophet ﷺ that if we cannot grasp it, there's something is not right. إن كنتم تحبون الله, if you love Allah, فاتبعوني, follow me. يحببكم الله, Allah will love you. Look at that. If you love Allah, follow me and Allah will love you. This is the instruction in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to us as well. If you love Allah, follow the Prophet ﷺ. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. Yet, my respected brothers and sisters, many times in our communities, we don't make the effort. We don't make the effort to learn who the Prophet ﷺ is. We don't make the effort to read about his life. We don't make the effort to read about his suffering and his sacrifices. When there's opportunities to learn and there's classes at our masajid, very few people come. And what is our excuse? What is our excuse? Yes, if you are ill, if you cannot make it, if you cannot transport yourself, you cannot do this. Yes, that's all valid excuses. And nobody's going to argue with that. But when you are at home and you are resting and you have your family and every single day your family watches TV. My respected brothers and sisters, we added it up once. You do the maths. You have young people here that might be at school, their maths might be better than ours. College students, do the maths. 2, 3, calculated. 3 hours of screen time every day. 7 days a week. 30 days a month. 12 months in a year. How many actual 24-hour days do you spend in front of the screen? How many? These days when we want to buy somebody a serious present, or the kid needs a phone. Even though he might not need a phone, no, his friend's got a phone. Her friend's got a phone. She needs a phone. Everybody at school got a pad. You need a pad? The school didn't say you must have a pad or a phone. But no, because the other kids have phones and pads, you also need a pad. How many keep tabs on what the kids doing on that phone? On that pad? Scrolling, watching things, seeing things. Do the maths again, my brother. How much time does your kid or the person that's under you spend on the screen? Now here's the jackpot question. We don't gamble in Islam, but I'll use the word because everybody knows it. Here's the jackpot question. Compare that to the amount of time you spend learning about the Prophet ﷺ. Compare that to the amount of time you spend trying to understand the most important exemplary in your entire life. Compare that to the amount of time that you spend trying to absorb information about the character of the person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. And you are on the highest level of character. And that's the question that we have to ask. Sometimes, my respected brothers and sisters, it is not just about gaining the information. Many times people go into exams, they write tests, they have to do preparation for those tests. And you ask students, and they say, I got some questions wrong. They studied really hard, and I got some questions wrong. And you ask about those questions. And as they speak, they realize, oh, subhanAllah, I didn't understand the question correctly. My respected brothers and sisters, it is time that we start asking ourselves the right questions. It is time that we are not the ones that are just consumers, that are just led along the river. Canoes and boats without oars, without rudders. Wherever the river goes, we go. Wherever that river goes, our children go. Wherever that river goes, our family ends up. Take some control over your decisions. Take some control over what happens in your house. Take some control over what you share with your friends and your family members. Make some effort, my respected brothers and sisters, to bring the life of the Prophet ﷺ into your life. To share with your family about the Prophet ﷺ. And I say this with great sincerity and humility, my respected brothers and sisters. Please try to do that. Let us all make an effort to do that. Let us change the way we develop our identities. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our community and all the other Muslim communities in the Ummah of those that follow the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And let we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring the character of the Prophet ﷺ into our lives. To shape our character, to shape the character of our children, to shape the character of those around us, our colleagues, our friends, to shape the character of those that have not yet embraced the deen, to shape the character according to the character of the Prophet, so that we may represent Islam and we may share the beauty of Islam through our behavior. Let us not be of those that one day we ask, what do you know about the Prophet? And we say, I don't know much. Let us be of those that when we ask about the Prophet, we get excited. We get excited. Our children get excited. The same way they can get excited to watch a soccer player or a football player or a basketball player, they get excited about the Prophet. They get happy about the Prophet. This is what we should encourage. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us in all our efforts everywhere. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help the Ummah in its time of need. اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين في فلسطين وفي الصين وفي السودان وفي كل مكان في الأرض اللهم انصرنا اللهم انصرنا اللهم ارحمنا اللهم ارحمنا اللهم اغفر لنا اللهم اغفر لنا يا رب العالمين يا غفور رحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا ذا الجلال والإكرام اللهم أنت مقصودنا ورضاك مطلوبنا وفقنا يا الله لما تحب وترضى اللهم اجعلنا على سنة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم اجعلنا على سنة حبيبك اللهم علمنا من حديث وسنة حبيبك سيد المرسلين قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون ولذكر الله أعلى وأولى وأعز وأجل وهم وتم أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون.